Now, let's get back to this conversation. On Wednesday, South Africa celebrated workers under a cloud of unemployment. While the focus was mainly on calls for the improvement of workers' conditions, government and the private sector were also called on to address the country's unemployment crisis, especially among young people. For more on this discussion, I'm now joined once again by Thulani Tshefuta, who is the head of the Nedlac constituency. Thulani, thank you so much for joining us once again this evening. As we had started this conversation, I was asking, we celebrated Workers' Day. What is Nedlac's assessment of the current state of employment and unemployment in South Africa?
Well, thank you very much, Katlego, and good evening to you and the viewers of Newzroom Africa. Yes, indeed, the International Workers' Day, being the 1st of May, celebrated by South Africa and the world, is a day that is used to celebrate the gains and achievements that have been made for the benefit of the workers. And at the same time, it is used to reflect on those areas that remain challenges. And of course, workers' issues are not only concerned about those that are employed. It is true that unemployment was a resounding, consistent message that came across from all who participated in the activities of the International Workers' Day, across all federations, including those that were addressed even by those that are leading government. And so it is indeed a grave area of concern. We believe that the challenges of unemployment, and especially youth unemployment, are depriving us as a society of a situation where there would be a knock-on effect on other societal challenges. We believe that if you address unemployment, you will address poverty. We believe that if you address unemployment, you will address some of the factors that contribute to inequalities. We believe that if you address unemployment, you will go a long way in addressing other social ills that our communities and the society are confronted with. And so it shall continue to remain an area of grave concern. And it becomes even worse when you look into the picture of youth unemployment, particularly because the evidence of the 2022 census report tells us now something that we have known for decades already, that South Africa is a youthful population. It is a youthful society. It has more young people than any other population group, which people call the youth bulge. And what that presents you is that it presents you with opportunities only in as far as you can invest in the lives of those young people through education and skills, such that they become active economic players in society later on. And even challenges of the growth of our economy are also affected by high levels of unemployment. And so unemployment is one single challenge that we must all, as sectors of society, combine efforts and resources and make sure that we fight it to the floor.
Certainly, unemployment in South Africa remains stubbornly high, standing over 30%. What do you see as the primary drivers of this persistent unemployment challenge?
The first of those, we cannot take away the fact that there are numbers of jobs that continue to be advertised in South Africa every day. And they have their own requirements, which requirements we believe do not match those that are outside of the labor market. And so there is a balancing act that we must do between the demand and the supply. That which is demanded by the labor market must be matched by the supply of the necessary people with the necessary skills to fit into those roles. And so that is one of the factors that contribute to high levels of unemployment. Another factor that contributes to high levels of unemployment is that you are sitting with employers who do not see it as part of their responsibility to contribute towards employment in South Africa and not make the necessary investments into expansion of their businesses, into expansion of their production lines, such that they can use the supplies to induce demand for consumption of those products and services. And on the overall, there is general misbehavior or conduct in as far as saying that we cannot employ young people because they do not have the necessary skills and all of that. And to some extent, we believe that the debate about skills is used as an excuse as to why young people cannot be employed. Even the most lowest of jobs will be told that they need experience. And there is nowhere else where you get experience outside the workplace. And so there is a certain level and extent of liberalization of the labor market that must take place to allow space for young people to enter and enter in large numbers. And one of the factors that we cannot take away is that we do not accept that it is a final economic decision that private sector is the only employer. We are now sitting with empirical evidence that is pointing us to a case of visible impact from the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative that has been led from the presidents, where large numbers of young people have been linked to employment opportunities. And so we believe that whilst we call on the private sector to open its factory floors and employ young people and others beyond the age of 35, because they also need employment, they also have needs, and they also have skills, and they also need income. They must basically make sure that the balance between the public employment programs and the call for private sector are matching.
Speaking on that, Thulani, in terms of matching the two, you also make mention of employers that have the capacity and the capability of employing more young people, but they certainly just don't take up the opportunities to do that. In as much as we say that government needs to create a conducive environment in order for businesses to be able to employ, how can government hold businesses accountable in ensuring that in that environment that is conducive, that has been created by government, the private sector actually does open up its factory floors and ensures that young people are employed?
The conversation that we need is a conversation that should provide space to business and employers in general for them to lay bare what is it that they mean when they talk about confidence boosters on our economy. They must be given an opportunity to express as to what are the factors that constitute this enabling environment, such that we go back and look into many other endeavors, including the investment drives that have been driven by government, to see if there are no other factors that have already been delivered, but the needle is not moving on the other side of the employment creation. And when we do that, we must do it with the intent of making sure that that which is raised by employers and business as factors to boost confidence and provide or create an enabling environment are provided for. I know for a fact that one of such factors will be issues that relate to a supply of consistent and affordable energy, in which case all of us must try and find solutions in addressing that. But once we address that, there has to be certain assumptions that we make about the private sector increasing their investments. But that is the part that is lacking, where you see improvements in the establishment of the enabling environment, but the needle is not moving in as far as the creation of employment. This is one thing that all employers must understand and appreciate, that the retention of young people outside the labor market in large numbers is not sustainable for the very same businesses. It is not sustainable even for the fiber of our own democratic society. Large numbers of young people remaining unemployed will threaten the very fiber of our society to a point where we may have no democracy to talk about if young people cannot have a claim on the economy of the very same democratic society that we say we're building.
Of course. And I mean, there are other concerns about the quality of available jobs and the prevalence of precarious work. How does your labor movement ensure that new jobs created are decent, sustainable, and they do provide a living wages?
Well, we're not a labor movement. But here is the point. We are all for decent work.
Yes.
South Africa has committed itself to that. The reality that we're confronted with is that the nature of work is changing right in front of our eyes in South Africa and in Africa and in the world. We need not remain behind the curve of that changing nature of work. When we experienced the prevalence of COVID-19 in 2020-21 and even into 2022, the majority of those 2.3 million people who lost their jobs opted for income-generating opportunities in the informal sector of the economy. And now, employment and income will continue to be defined in new terms than what we defined employment and income generation pre-COVID. Those are the realities we must be alive to. Those are the initiatives that must be supported to make sure that for those who work in the informal sector of the economy, it does not mean that because the sector is informal, the working conditions must not be safe. It must mean that we need to inject minimum level of support even in the informal sector of the economy in order to raise the base and the standard of those who work in that sector, such that its contribution even into the overall picture of the economy in South Africa is measured in a very, very different way. If those factors like that can be considered, even our percentages or numbers of employment and unemployment can begin to change in South Africa.
Lastly, Thulani, I mean, what specific commitments or actions is Nedlac committing to in taking part in the next coming year in order to advocate for the support of policies and programs that are aimed at reducing unemployment?
Well, Nedlac is a combination of 4 constituencies, being a business, government, labor, and civil society. And I can only speak on behalf of civil society. The first of those is that we are sitting with a framework agreement on the Presidential Jobs Summit. There are many factors that are still part of that agreement that, if dusted off and just implemented, can change the picture of unemployment in South Africa. We also believe that as a platform of social dialogue, Nedlac should begin to use the space for us to hold each other accountable as social partners. We believe that when we engage in social dialogue, it must not be one making demands over another. We must all raise our hands and be counted as part of the solution as to what are the things that we can do in our spaces in order to promote employment, in order to encourage employment, make sure that we combine our efforts and endeavors in attracting investments, and do everything possible to grow the economy and thereby contribute to employment. And we already know that even as a platform of social dialogue, we were at the center of developing the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan to see South Africa re-emerging from the doldrums of COVID-19. And that program still remains relevant. When we do that, there are cross-cutting factors that we must look into. Nothing will ever work in the economy and the labor market in South Africa until we address energy, until we address water, until we address skills development. And with those, we believe that we can immediately lift the base of the numbers in terms of more jobs that can be created in South Africa.
All right, Thulani, that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for your voice in this very important conversation of a lot of unemployment, especially amongst those that are the youth in South Africa. That's Thulani Tshefuta of Nedlac speaking to us there.